At 16, they told my sister she was destined for a life of luxury, and they told me I wasn't good enough. 20 years later, I'm a millionaire, and my sister? She's homeless, sleeping on a street corner just a few blocks from my mansion. Last night, she got my number and called me, begging for help. Every rational part of my brain, every scar she's left on my life, is screaming at me to say no, to just block the number and walk away. But there's a small, guilty voice in the back of my head asking the same question over and over. Would that make me a monster? The choice to understand how two sisters who started in the same cramped bedroom ended up on opposite ends of the universe. You have to go back. You have to understand the air we breathed in that house. It wasn't just air. It was this thick, heavy smog of desperation. Our parents weren't bad people, not like in the movies. They were just tired. Tired of the bills that piled up on the kitchen counter. Tired of the rust eating away at our car. Tired of the quiet, gnawing fear that they would never be enough. And in that house of faded hopes, my sister Amelia was a firework. She was everything I wasn't. Where I was quiet, she was loud. Where I had mousy brown hair, hers was a cascade of blonde that seemed to catch the light even in our dingy living room. She had a smile that could charm anyone and a laugh that made you forget, for a second, how much everything ached. She was the golden child, the one our parents pinned all their dreams on. Parental favoritism is a complex thing, but it's a felt reality in many families. It can fuel lifelong sibling rivalries and mess with everyone's emotional well-being. We were one of those families. I was the other one, the quiet, bookish one. The one whose good grades were met with a distracted pat on the head, while Amelia's role in the school play was the story of the week. I wasn't resentful, not really. It was just the way things were. She was the sun, and I was just a planet in her orbit, happy for the warmth. In some ways, the unfavored child gets a weird kind of freedom. You don't have to perform the pleasing dance, so you're free to figure out who you are without all that pressure. My world was the library, lost in stories because my own felt so small. I learned to rely on myself because it was clear no one else was really watching. The day everything changed was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd aced a math test. I ran home, the paper clutched in my hand, feeling this rare burst of pride. But when I opened the door, the air in the house was electric. There was a man in our living room wearing a suit that probably cost more than a mortgage payment. Shoes so shiny, I could see my own shocked face in them. He was talking to my parents, but his eyes were locked on Amelia. She was 16, a terrifyingly common age for predators to seek out vulnerable girls. My parents were hanging on his every word, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. He called himself a talent scout. He used words like potential once. In a generation, star. He painted a picture of a life for Amelia that was plucked right out of the magazines she hid under her bed. A life of travel, beautiful clothes, fame, and most importantly, money. To fix everything. He barely glanced at me in the doorway, my math test forgotten. And in that moment, I saw the choice being made. Not by him, but by my parents. Their hope, which had been dormant for so long, had found a new home. And that home was Amelia. I remember my mother looking from Amelia's beaming face to my plain, confused one, and there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity? An apology? I don't know. But the message was clear. They were choosing her. It's a disturbing reality that in a significant number of child trafficking cases, family members are involved not as malicious villains, but as facilitators. Blinded by false promises or their own desperation, the man slid a contract across our wobbly coffee table. My parents signed it. They didn't read the fine print. How could they? It was written in the language of dreams, not law. All they saw was a lifeboat. They didn't see the holes in the bottom. Amelia packed her bags that week. She promised to call, to write, to send for us. The day she left, our little house felt huge and empty. The silence was deafening. For a while, the dream held. We got postcards from Paris, from Milan, glossy pictures with a few hurried lines. The work is hard but amazing. Missing you. But then the postcards slowed down. The calls became less frequent, more strained. When she did call, there was an edge to her voice. She'd ask for Mania, 100 here, 500 therefore, portfolio updates, or casting fees. My parents always sent it. It was an investment, they'd say. I tried to look up her agency online, but it was like chasing a ghost, just a single web page with stock photos and a disconnected phone number. It's a classic tactic. The internet has become a primary tool for traffickers to create these elaborate fronts that are impossible to verify. While my parents poured their energy into Amelia's phantom career, I poured myself into my schoolwork. Every A was a silent rebellion, my way of screaming that I was here too. It wasn't about getting their attention anymore. It was about building a life so solid that no one could ever dismiss me again. I got a scholarship to a state university. The day I left, there was no party. Just a quick hug from my mom and a $50 bill from my dad. Their minds were somewhere else, still waiting for a call from a daughter who was slowly, quietly disappearing. The fall and the rise college was my escape. For the first time, I was judged by my work, by my mind. I chose computer science. It was logical, practical, a world I could build and control, one line of code at a time. I worked 3 jobs, lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee, spent late nights in the computer lab. The hum of the servers, my only company. I was running away from the girl who wasn't good enough and toward a future where I decided my own value. Years went by. I graduated with honors, landed a job at a small tech startup, and started climbing. The hours were brutal, but I loved it. I saved, I invested, I learned. That little startup was eventually bought by a huge company, and my stock options suddenly became life-changing. I didn't stop. I used that money to start my own company. It was a huge risk, but I was betting on myself, and I won. By 35, I was a self-made millionaire. I built the life they had promised my sister, but I built it with my own 2 hands. And just as my life was taking off, Amelia's came crashing down. She showed up on my doorstep one rainy Tuesday. I almost didn't recognize her. The firework had fizzled out. Her blonde hair was brittle, her face was thin, and her eyes were hollow. The light was just gone. She was 28, but she looked 50. The story came out in a torrent of sobs. The talent scout was a trafficker. The modeling jobs were lies. She was passed from man to man, city to city. They took her passport, controlled her money, and used a constant stream of threats and manipulation to keep her in line. It was a textbook case of psychological abuse designed to break someone completely. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. While I was building my empire, my sister was living in hell. All those years I had secretly resented her. She had been a victim. I did what I thought any sister would do. I opened my door. "This is your home now," I told her. "You're safe." It was the biggest mistake of my life. The gratitude lasted about a week. Then things started to shift. It was small at first. She'd complain about the food, criticize my furniture, make little comments about how easy I had it. That pressure she once felt to be perfect had curdled into this belief that the world owed her something. Then the manipulation began. She used her trauma like a weapon. Anytime I set a boundary like asking her to clean up or not to bring strangers into my home, she'd break down, accusing me of not understanding what she'd been through. The financial drain started. She'd lose her wallet. Phone would get stolen. It was a black hole of need, and I was pouring my life, my energy, and my money straight into it. My therapist tried to warn me. She told me I was enabling her, that my wealth, which I saw as a solution, was actually making it worse. It created a situation where Amelia had no reason to get better. She had all the comfort without any of the accountability. The breaking point came 6 months later. I had a 2-week business trip to Asia. I left her with a stocked fridge and a debit card for emergencies. When I came back, the house was destroyed. There had been a massive party. Cigarette burns on my sofa, wine stains on the rugs, and a collection of antique porcelain figures my grandmother left me was smashed to pieces. But the worst part was my home office. It had been ransacked. Okay? And my emergency safe, where I kept backup hard drives and cash, was empty. She was gone. The debit card was maxed out. It took me a week to find her at a seedy motel across town. I confronted her. There was no apology, only rage. She screamed at me that I owed her, that my millions were built on her suffering, that I was the lucky one. Her words were like acid. She truly believed that my success was stolen from her. I finally understood. I couldn't fix her. The damage wasn't just from the trafficking. It was from a lifetime of being told she was special. Her fall from that pedestal hadn't taught her humility. It had only filled her with rage at the world, and especially at me, the sister who dared to build a better life. I looked at this stranger screaming at me and made a choice. I told her she was no longer welcome in my life. Offered her a deal. I would pay in full for a long-term residential treatment program that dealt with trauma and addiction. I would pay the facility directly. But I would not give her another dollar in cash. She spat at me. She told me to take my charity and choke on it. She didn't want to get better. She just wanted to be rescued, so I walked away. I changed the locks, changed my number, and for a year, there was silence. I thought that was the end. It wasn't, because a few days ago, my new unlisted number rang. It was her. She was on the street. Experts often call the foster care system a highway to homelessness because a shocking number of kids end up on the street after they age out. Amelia was never in foster care, but she'd been through a different system, one of exploitation, and it had spat her out with nothing, just the same. And now she was calling, her voice raspy and weak, asking for help one more time. The resolution hearing her voice was like a ghost walking through my walls. The peace I had so carefully rebuilt shattered in an instant. Her voice was thin, stripped of the rage I remembered. It was the voice of someone at the bottom. She was in a park, she said, a 10-minute drive from my house. She was cold, hungry, and sorry. Every instinct screamed, "Hang up." My therapist's voice echoed in my head. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I knew giving her money or a place to stay would just restart the whole nightmare. And yet, she's your sister. She's homeless. You feel that pull, don't you? That invisible family contract that says you owe them something, no matter how much they hurt you. The world saw me as a success story, but in that moment, I just felt like that little girl again, looking at her broken, beautiful sister and feeling this toxic mix of pity, guilt, and rage. I didn't sleep. I paced my marble floors, the silence of my huge house making the war in my head even louder. I thought about the systems that failed her, predator, her parents, a society that chews up young people and offers them so few ways to recover. The link between abuse and later homelessness is terrifyingly strong. She wasn't just a bad person. She was a deeply wounded one. But my wounds mattered too. The years of being the less loved child, the betrayal that had a cost. Letting her back in wasn't just a risk to my money, was a risk to my sanity. By morning, I had a plan, not a plan to save her. I finally accepted that only she could do that. This was a plan to save myself. I drove to the park she mentioned. I found her on a bench near the duck pond, huddled in a thin jacket. When she saw me, her eyes filled with a desperate hope that was almost harder to take than her anger. I didn't hug her. I stood a few feet away. "Amelia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I got your message." The tears started. "So, sorry, Chloe. I messed up, please. Just for a few nights." I took a deep breath. The offer from last year still stands. I have the number for a residential treatment center. It's one of the best. They specialize in complex trauma. A car can be here in an hour to take you there. I will pay for the entire program. But I will not give you cash and I will not let you in my house. This is the only help I'm offering." The tears stopped. Instantly, her face hardened. "So, that's it. You're just going to leave your own sister on a park bench?" "I am not leaving you on a park bench," I said gently. "I am offering you a real lifeline, not a temporary fix. It's a chance to actually heal. It's a kind of help victims of exploitation desperately need but rarely get." "I don't need a hospital," she spat. "I need a place to stay." "No," I said, the word hanging in the air between us. "You don't need me to be your sister right now. You need me to be the person who loves you enough to say no. I will not enable you. I will not let you drag me down with you. I love the girl you were, and I mourn for her. But I cannot save the woman you've become. Only you can." I wrote the number on a piece of paper and held it out. She stared at it, then at my face, looking for a crack in my resolve. She found none. With one last, hateful glare, she turned her back on me. She didn't take the paper. I stood there for a moment, then turned, walked back to my car, and drove away. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It felt like cutting off a part of myself. That was 6 months ago. I don't know if she ever called that number. I have to believe I gave her the only real chance she had. Her choices are her own. The guilt isn't gone. It's a quiet hum under the surface of my days, a ghost in the empty rooms of my house. But it's not crippling me anymore. It's a scar, a reminder of a battle I had to fight for my own survival. I realized my wealth gave me a different kind of power. Not the power to fix my sister, but the power to create something good from this wreckage. I've started a foundation. It funds shelters and educational grants for homeless youth, especially those who've been through the foster system or trafficking. It's my way of honoring the sister I lost by trying to stop others from falling through the same cracks. My relationship with my parents is strained. They still don't get it. In their eyes, I'm the rich daughter who abandoned her sister. The favoritism that started it all makes it impossible for them to see the truth. It's a loneliness I've had to learn to live with. This is a story about two sisters, but it's also about boundaries. It's about the difference between helping and enabling. And it's about the tragic, painful truth that you cannot want someone's recovery more than they want it for themselves. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. I still wrestle with that decision every single day. The what-ifs can be deafening. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice with someone you love? Had to set a boundary that felt like it was breaking your own heart? Let me know your story in the comments. I read them all. Maybe by sharing, we can all feel a little less alone.